KitzurByte, techeiles, the blue string, and the stripes on a tallis. You may have seen some people have blue strings on their tallis. Some people, it's very common to have stripes on a tallis. What are the blue strings? What are the stripes? So we're going to start with the blue strings and then come back to the stripes. The Torah says that we're supposed to have blue strings on the corner of this garment. How many blue strings do you need? All four. So the answer, it's a difference of opinions whether one of the strings is supposed to be blue, whether two of the strings. The remaining strings are white, plain wool, and the blue strings are also wool, but they're dyed with a dye that comes from a fish, some sort of sea creature rather, that the Torah calls a chilazon. Now the big question is, what is this chilazon? So in temple times, even after the temple was destroyed for a few centuries, we knew what the chilazon was, and we therefore were able to make this techeiles, this wool that was dyed with the dye that comes from the chilazon. However, throughout our exile, we lost track of what this chilazon was. So for over 1,000 years, we didn't have techeiles. If you don't have techeiles, you don't have this blue dye, you make tzitzis with just plain white strings, plain white wool, which is what we did for over 1,000 years. In the past few hundred years, around 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there's been a movement to rediscover this chilazon, this animal, and to once again institute techeiles. There was a Hasidic Rebbe who was one of the Radziner Rebbes, and he did a lot of research on the chilazon. The Talmud goes through the different characteristics of this sea animal, and he came to the conclusion that chilazon was a fish called the cuttlefish. And he started making techeiles with dye that came from the cuttlefish, but it wasn't very well accepted by other rabbis, so most people still only had plain white wool strings. The first chief rabbi of Israel, his name was Rabbi Yitzchak Herzog. Parenthetically, people consider Rabbi Avraham Kook the first chief rabbi of Israel, but the truth is that he passed away before the state of Israel was founded. He was the chief rabbi of Palestine, but never of the state of Israel. So when Rabbi Kook passed away, then Rabbi Herzog was elected to be the chief rabbi of Palestine, and then when the state of Israel was founded, he became the chief rabbi of Israel. Besides being a huge Torah scholar, Rabbi Herzog also had a number of advanced degrees. And the topic of techeiles, of this blue wool, always fascinated him to the point where he wrote his thesis on this topic, on trying to identify what is this chilazon, where do we get this blue wool from, or the dye for the blue wool from. He actually created a name for the study of the blue wool, which he called porphyrology. Rabbi Herzog came to the conclusion that it's most likely that the animal that this chilazon is, that the Torah talks about, is the murex snail. The problem was the dye that came from the murex snail was more purple than blue. And so he passed away thinking that it was a murex snail, but not knowing how we got the blue techeiles out of it. In the 1980s, there was a chemist that discovered that if you take the dye that came out of the murex snail, or maybe in the process of making the dye, if you expose it to ultraviolet rays, such as sunlight, then guess what? It comes out blue instead of purple. And this started spreading, becoming quite accepted amongst large groups of Orthodox Jews as quite possibly, we never know 100%, but quite likely being the techeiles that the Torah talks about. So nowadays it's very common, you go into a store which sells tzitzis, they'll ask you if you want just white strings or if you want techeiles strings as well. If you have techeiles strings, you have these blue strings, then the way that you tie tzitzis is differently. So if you look closely at a techeiles pair of tzitzis, you'll notice it's not tied the same as a tzitzis which only has white strings. So now we get to the stripes on the tallis. Because for over 1,000 years, we didn't have techeiles, we were only using white strings, it became customary to put a blue stripe on the tallis, which wasn't coming from the chilazon, from the sea creature, because we didn't know what it was. It was made out of some sort of other dye, but it was blue at least, that would remind us, we really want techeiles on this, we just don't have it. At some point in history, I don't know when, it changed from blue to black, and that's when black stripes on a tallis became common. And more recently, especially in the non-Orthodox world, we started seeing stripes of many other colors appearing on tallis, also not just black or blue. But these stripes are just a custom. There's no halachic requirement for them. And as a matter of fact, in the Sephardic world, they usually do not have any stripes. Maybe a white stripe, but definitely not black or blue. And that is the background of techeiles, the blue strings, and the stripes on the tallis.